Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Melanin Reset podcast. So, we have had a lot happen over the past week, and it is my pleasure to be here with you on today. So, thank you for tuning in. It was the civil rights attorney David Bill who once said, "It appears my fears have been realized. We have made progress in everything, yet nothing has changed." He said this in reference to Black Americans, African American progress in the United States of America. In his book, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, he wrote, "Black people will never gain full equality in this country," talking about America. "Even those Herculean efforts we hail as successful will produce no more than temporary peaks of progress. Short-lived victories that slide into irrelevance as racial patterns adapt in ways that maintain white dominance. This is a hard to accept fact that all history verifies. We must acknowledge it, not as a sign of submission, but as an ultimate act of defiance." An ultimate act of defiance. So you ask yourself after reading this, how far have we actually gotten? I'm glad you asked. We've gotten far. We've gotten far. We have freedoms that our ancestors didn't have. And for that, I will say we've gotten far. But I will also say this, we still have a long way to go. For those of you who are not familiar with civil rights attorney, the late Derrick Albert Bell Jr., he was the first tenured African American professor of law at Harvard Law School and is largely credited as one of the originators of the critical race theory, or CRT. We've been hearing a lot about that. But this podcast tonight is only referencing his quote that I read to you at the beginning. It's only referencing that. And we won't get into CRT tonight. But I am concerned with a lot that has been going on lately. You know, some people say Black people don't listen. We listen and we pay attention. And we also pay attention when you're taking us for granted. But the late Derrick Bell, I consider him to be one of our most profound Black American leaders and a profound scholar in his own right. You see, you would have to be able to understand what he was saying in his quote. And let me go back to it. Let me read it again. It says, "It appears my fears have been realized. We have made progress in everything, yet nothing has changed." Nothing has changed. As I was saying, I consider him to be one of our most profound Black leaders, one of our most profound scholars. You know, you would have to be able to understand that as an African American. It's like what the great James Baldwin once said when he was talking about Negroes in America or in this country. James Baldwin said this. He said, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all the time and in one's work. And part of the rage is this. It isn't only what is happening to you, but what is happening around you, and all of the time in the face of the most extraordinary and criminal indifference. Indifference of most white people in this country and their ignorance. Now, Since this is so, it's a great temptation to simplify the issues under the illusion that if you simplify them enough, people will recognize them. I think this illusion is very dangerous because, in fact, it isn't the way it works. A complex thing can't be made simple. And he's talking about the treatment of Black people. He says a complex thing can't be made simple. You simply have to try to deal with it in all its complexity and hope to get that complexity across. He said that about dealing with Black people and specifically Black Americans, African Americans. You see, for the past week or so, the American people have been hard pressed with news about what's happening in Ukraine. In last week's podcast, I told you why we should care about what was going on in Ukraine. But I only gave my perspective from an American perspective, an African American perspective, watching from the comfort of my sofa. You know, I was watching everything unfold on my TV screen and on social media and in the periodicals I received via email. I was watching it unfold, and I said this. I said we should care for 3 reasons about what's going on in Ukraine. Number one, we should care because it's going to be our troops that are being sent there. When I say our troops, I'm talking about all of them, of course, all American troops. But for the most part, you know, most of America's troops are predominantly Black and brown. Number 2, we should care because of our tax dollars. And it's our tax dollars that's being spent to fund whatever is going on over there and whatever is being sent over there. You know, whether it's money or whether it's weapons or whether it's some other type of support. It's our tax dollars that is funding this. And number 3, it's our representation abroad that affects the way that human rights are around the world. That number 3 is, I said it was our representation abroad that affects the way that human rights are around the world. Now, when I was saying that, little did I know at the time that African students and Indian students who were in Ukraine to receive a higher education, some of them going to college for to be a doctor, some of them was studying engineering, and so on and so forth. They went there because it is less expensive to go there. Okay. Nevertheless, they were in Ukraine. And when I made that statement, little did I know that they would be met with racism when they were trying to evacuate the country. So once they got to the Ukrainian borders, racism met them there. Racism met them there. And I said that I sat and I watched, and other countries watch what was happening. And at first, all we kept hearing about on television was the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian people. And they gave descriptions of the Ukrainian people. They gave descriptions of the Ukrainian people and let us know, you know, what type of people they were and what type of country it was. You know, so little did I know what was going on with the African students, and some of them had families, with the Indian students, and again, some of them had families. And it wasn't just them, it was the Arabs and any other student or a person fleeing Ukraine that was of color that was experiencing this racism. But the United States of America, as I told you last week, is an example for the world, and the world watches. I said that other countries watch the way America addresses human rights issues. They provide an example for the world, and these African students and some with families were met with such inhumanity. along the Ukraine borders. If you haven't heard, some of them were pulled off of trains. Some of them were blocked from even getting on trains. Some of them were forced to pay money that they probably didn't have. Some of them were told to walk. Some of them, now keep in mind, they were told to walk, and these are extremely cold temperatures right now. But anyway, they were fleeing for their lives like everyone else in Ukraine, or the other Ukrainian people who sent their families on or who were not fighting. Some of them weren't allowed on buses just to get to the border from wherever they were, from the universities they were attending. So let me be clear. They were met with discrimination. It was said they were told the Ukrainians first, our women first, our children first. But it wasn't just the Africans who endured the discrimination. It was all immigrants of color, which means that white supremacy transcends to all borders, both domestic and abroad. Not only were there physical acts of discrimination, there were psychological acts of discrimination in the media reporting. One journalist described Ukrainian people as having blonde hair and blue eyes, as if to say, once you get to the border, if they don't have blonde hair and blue eyes, they're not Ukrainian. So, they was also said, one reporter also said, Ukrainian was not like a third world country. It was civilized. It wasn't like one of the third world countries that are in India or in Africa. So understand this: racism is embedded in the system of white supremacy. What we need to understand is that white supremacy is a global system, and the diaspora needs a global system to combat it. That's why the world stood up on its head and took notice of the movement of Black lives after the killing of George Floyd during the summer of 2020. The protests were around the world, and the world took notice. At the same time, white nationalists and supremacists in this country showed us their aspirations on J6 or January 6th of 2021, when they tried to overturn the election and take over the government. Now, let's couple all that with war, because right now there's a war going on. And right now, America has aligned with her alliances, and our troops have been sent to the borders of those countries to stand and support the countries who we have an alliance with. So couple all of that with war, and it's very easy to assess that this could be a dangerous time for us, which leads me to the question, what about us? What is the current status of African Americans in this country? Some say that the American government is prime and ready to bring back the draft for the American military. Well, Joe Biden didn't mention that in his State of the Union the other night. I hope you watched, because I watched. And in his State of the Union, I was careful in listening and hearing what Joe Biden had to say. But there was 3 things that stood out to me. Number one, when Joe Biden said, fund the police, what he did in order to get along with the Republicans, because the old way of politics is you have to give a little to get a little. But one of the reasons we put Joe Biden in office was we wanted police reform. But when Joe Biden said fund the police, we want them funded. Have y'all even noticed some of the policing budgets around the country? In New York alone, the budget is $6 billion. $6 billion. Not million, $6 billion in New York alone. But anyway, he basically said, I don't care about the George Floyd Policing Act anymore. That's a mute discussion point for me. We want them funded. That's my opinion. And that's the way I took it. Another thing that Joe Biden kept doing during his speech, he kept calling the Republicans his friends. I found a problem with that. Why? We have watched over the past 5 years past 5. Let me go back further than that. We have watched over the past 13 years what Republicans do to black people. How they don't care. We watched the way they treated Obama. That's why I said the past 13 years. And then when Trump came into office, we saw what they did. But yeah, we got a lot of us saying, y'all voted for him. Excuse me. We did. But I'm not going to even tell you we voted for the less of two evils. We understood who we were voting for when we voted for Joe Biden. We also understood that Joe Biden was a reset. Okay? It was black women that turned, and men, let me be crystal clear on that. It was black people, period, who turned Joe Biden's campaign around once he got to South Carolina. That put the ball rolling. Once he got there, the momentum started to build for Joe Biden. But anyway, he called the Republicans his friend. Okay? That's a privilege that he has that we don't have. Okay? Because the question has been asked, what was it in his speech that was in for Black America? What in his speech was for, Black America? Now, he did take a victory lap for nominating the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. So he took a victory lap for that. But she hasn't been confirmed yet. She will be. She will be confirmed. But her confirmation won't change the ideals of the majority of the court. So all that is fine and dandy. But remember, I told y'all, Joe Biden was a reset from Donald Trump. And we see what then happened with that. Last week, I didn't want to connect the dots for y'all, but y'all remember when Donald Trump was impeached the first time, it was because he withheld money from Ukraine. $400 million that they needed. Donald Trump withheld that money because he wanted them to find some dirt on Hunter Biden. He told Zelensky, the Ukraine president, to find dirt on Hunter Biden because he wanted to throw his competitor under the bus. So he withheld that, and Congress impeached them as they should have. It was the Senate who chose not to convict Donald Trump. And now here we are in Putin's war Ukrainian people are in a war with Putin. Okay? So Joe Biden was a reset. That is what he is. And we don't need to get too caught up in what he said last Tuesday during the State of the Union. What we need to be paying attention to is what is going on in our states and on the local levels, because we are in another election year. This is the midterm elections that are coming up. This is for state, this is for city, and on the national level, because we have to choose who's going to be in the Senate. And I told y'all before, in order to get things passed in the Senate, that is where the power is, the United States Senate, because we see Manchin and Sinema, they not letting the Democrats pass anything, hardly. So we need to have power in the Senate. That means we need to elect more Democrat senators. Now, some people gonna be saying, y'all on that Democrat plantation. Let me tell you something. There's only two major political parties in America. And understand, I'm not gonna waste my vote trying to elect a third party. Now, mind you, I have said that we need more than two parties. But right now, it is too crucial for us to be playing with our voices. Because right now, no voting rights legislation has been passed, and Joe Biden didn't make mention of it in the State of the Union the other night. Did he? Okay. So, but anyway, we have to focus on the state and the local levels, because that's where the most harm is being done right now. Look at all the stuff that's going on in the state of Texas. And I say Texas because that's where I live at. Okay. We got Governor Hot Wheels doing all kind of stuff. And when I say look at what's going on, I'm talking about look at the policies and the laws that are being put in place. See, you got politics and then you have policies. And we need to understand that policies are the laws that are being put in place. Okay? Governor Abbott is attacking a woman's right to choose. I'm going to say Governor Abbott and the Republicans, because it's passing in the Texas House on partisan way. That's the only way it's passing. It's not bipartisan, it's partisan. Clearly partisan, strictly partisan. Okay, he's attacking a woman's right to choose. He's going after trans kids' parents. And I'm like, why is Texas government in its citizens' personal business like this, when they supposed to be the party of personal freedom? Right? The right, the conservatives, the right, they supposed to be the party of personal freedom. We want freedom, freedom, freedom. Well, leave people alone. Do y'all see the hypocrisy? But this is Texas, and this is America. And on that, that's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. That's all I got. So, with that being said, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Also, click on the tiny bell to be notified when a new episode drops. A new episode will be dropped frequently. The visual podcast is available on YouTube. And now I'm happy to announce that the audio version of the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, and other podcast streaming platforms. So thank you for joining me. It is always a pleasure. This has been the realest homegirl, Valarie Winn, and I will talk to you all on the next podcast. Peace.